the younger people, I think, get out of jail when when the whole thing collapses, because they don't have anything to lose. The people who are going to get wiped out have savings, have financial assets. That's why prices really soared in 2021, 2022. Trump and the Republicans want to say, oh, it was because of Biden. I mean, it wasn't because of Biden. The policies that created those price increases happened under Trump. It was, Trump's final year, 2020, when we had COVID. And that's when the deficits exploded with all these ridiculous government programs,
like what?
The purchasing power or protection PPP program, whatever PPP. It was, or the stimulus programs. But the Fed slashed interest rates back to zero in 2020. So we really primed the pump with a lot of inflation. There is a lag between the creation of the inflation, which is the expansion of the money supply and credit, and the impact it has on prices. So we created the inflation under Trump. It manifests itself in rising prices, mainly under Biden. But if you look back at a chart of the CPI and see when it really started to rise sharply, it was in the last 3 or 4 months of Trump. And then that continued. And it was accelerating even before Biden's first bill was passed. And so even if Trump had served 2 consecutive terms, had he been elected president, would have had the same thing. Inflation had been just as bad if Trump had been reelected back then as Biden. And now I think it's going to be even worse, in Trump's second term than it was, under Biden's, because I think we're going to see this big drop in the dollar as the Fed has to really crank up QE again. Walsh said, inflation is a choice, and he's going to make that same choice. He's going to make that choice for the same reason that Greenspan chose inflation, the same reason that Bernanke and Yellen and Powell, they all chose it because the alternative was a crash in the stock market, a crash in the bond market, which we need, a crash in the real estate market, a severe recession, high unemployment.
We need it.
A financial crisis. Well, unfortunately, we need a lot of that stuff because the whole economy is screwed up because of years of artificially low interest rates, inflated asset prices. The economy is messed up by what the government has done. Right? Free market forces have not been allowed to operate. And so we have all kinds of imbalances in the economy, bubbles, misallocations of resources. There's been so many mistakes that have been made as a result of this bad monetary policy that correcting them, will involve a severe recession, bankruptcies, a big increase in unemployment. It's going to be very difficult to fix what the government broke.
So I think where the younger generations, looking at millennials and Gen Z, and what's the generation below them that's not in the workforce yet called? I don't even remember. They're called what? Gen Alpha. So they're not in the workforce yet. But if we're talking about a future crash here sometime in the next 5 years or something, where people are going to take issue with that type of idea is that this entire bubble has been inflated by the older generations being in power. And those people own the homes that they bought for fucking 10 grand in 1972 and are now worth 3.5 million. They'll be okay when something like that happens. The people who will get hit the hardest overall by, and this isn't a perfect way of putting it, but the overall weight of being hit when you look at unemployment, opportunity, stopping the economy, taking away income, things like that, are going to be the younger generations. And they're probably sitting here. I mean, I know I am looking at this going, well, wait a second. The people that caused this are the older people, and now they want us to carry the bag because it's a healthy way to reset the economy. It's kind of a tough argument.
No, actually, it's going to be the reverse.
You think it'll be the reverse?
Yeah. Well, right now, it's my generation, right? I'm at the tail end of the baby boom.
Fuck. Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
But, yes, a lot of people bought homes, for $50,000, $75,000 that are now, $1 million, $2 million, whatever. But they're not really worth that because they can't sell them. There's no buyers who can afford to pay those prices. It's an illusion.
It's an
And
illusion?
in fact, well, people can't sell their homes. I mean, look at the supply of homes for sale. That the price, time on the market is going up. The sales are collapsing because people can't afford these prices. And the reason that prices are too high is because of the government policy of subsidized mortgages, guaranteed mortgages, artificially low interest rates, the deductibility of mortgage interest. All of these policies were designed to increase housing demand. And all that did is push up prices. And in fact, even Donald Trump, when he's asked about the housing problem, his solution is not lower prices. He wants prices to keep rising because he wants to protect the paper wealth of maybe his base.
The boomers.
So he just wants to make it so that people can borrow more money to overpay for these houses by lowering interest rates, which we really can't do without just creating massive inflation. But what's going to happen is home prices are ultimately going to collapse. And so that, that will benefit the people who don't own homes who want to buy them. That same thing with stocks. I mean, all these prices are going to come down unless, we have hyperinflation. Then all the prices go way up. But
people are in the streets.
But it's only in inflated dollars. The prices won't mean anything.
That's right.
If the dollar collapses, and then the price of gold soars, and ultimately, the younger people, I think, get out of jail when when the whole thing collapses, because they don't have anything to lose. The people who are going to get wiped out have savings, have financial assets, have these overpriced homes. But right now, younger people are struggling because of the policies that are being pursued to keep the bubble from deflating. That is the problem. The artificially low interest rates, the overvalued assets, that's what's harming. And in fact, younger people now, they're paying these payroll taxes. If you get a job or you're self-employed, you're paying 15% payroll taxes. That money is going to retirees who are, playing golf.
That's right.
And,
I'm well aware.
And a lot of young people are struggling, and those taxes are going to have to go up. I mean, if they're going to try to continue this Social Security Ponzi scheme, they're going to have to continue to raise taxes on the younger people who are still working so that the older people who stopped working can keep getting money. But the money's not there. I mean, the money was spent, decades ago.
Yeah.
The government didn't set it aside and invest it. It was all spent. And so either there has to be massive cuts in benefits for the people who are receiving Social Security, or they're going to raise taxes on the younger people who are still paying.
How do we wind that down? Social Security, like you said, it has a Ponzi. We just had the fat electrician in here. He laid the whole thing out. Like, it has a Ponzi scheme. It's got Ponzi scheme written all over it. So how do we just cut the cord when all the people who would have to vote on that legislation are people who are incentivized not to cut the cord because they'll be voted out of office right away if they do?
Yeah, well, you have a lot of people who are living off of Social Security, who collect Social Security, and they're not going to vote for a politician who's going to take it away.
That's right.
Originally when Social Security was first proposed back in the 1930s, a lot of Republicans were against creating Social Security. Roosevelt created it, but none of them want to get rid of it now. I mean, once people get a benefit, it's almost impossible to take it away. Yeah. Even the people that might have opposed it before it was created don't want to take it away. So that's why they call Social Security the third rail, because if you touch it, you're politically dead. And that is the problem. And it's one of the reasons I think that you have this big increase in the appeal of communism, socialism among young people, is because maintaining this Ponzi scheme is very harmful to the younger generation who's holding the bag. And they kind of get led astray because they blame their predicament on capitalism. None of this is capitalism. This is all the socialism that crept into capitalism. The government introduces socialism into capitalism, and that causes problems. And then the problems get blamed on capitalism. And the solution is always, well, we need more government to solve these problems, when it was the government that created the problems.
Could you see how people might look at something like, say, a wide open policy, free policy, like Reagan did with trickle down economics and say that ended up having capitalism lead to, and I say this as someone who believes in capitalism, by the way, I just want to be clear, I'm devil's advocating, but like that led to people that it was supposed to trickle down to actually not receiving it, and just the top half of society got, or the top 10% of society got way more wealthy?
Yeah, well, the Reagan tax cuts, they did reduce marginal tax rates, but the problem was government spending continued to increase. They never got the spending cuts that they were supposed to get, and so the deficits got bigger and bigger under Reagan, so it wasn't legitimate tax relief. Although I think the reduction in the marginal rate of tax was a good thing, and it ultimately led to the government collecting more taxes, but the spending outstripped it. That was the big problem, was the increase in government.
Thank you guys for watching the episode. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. They're both a huge, huge help. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below.